This is Christopher Walken, and you're listening to the Fantasy Football Helpers Podcast. Valuable fantasy football advice with some entertainment thrown in. Hey Todd, it wouldn't kill you to play some competitive sports once in a while, would it?
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Helpers Podcast. I'm your host, George Banco. Coming to you in the off-season via Skype, our good friend and writer for Fantasy Football Helpers is Casey Bass. What is happening?
George, how you doing? You're thinking, you're saying that it's the off-season, but I don't think we have an off-season. It seems like every week there's something pretty huge to talk about, and I made
a mistake. You're right. And it's not even technically the off season because playoffs are still going on. But it's the fantasy football off season unless you're playing, a DraftKings single or a daily fantasy league. But for the most part, yes, I agree with you. There is no off season here, and we're going to get into that in this podcast. But I totally agree with you, Casey.
Yeah, coaching changes all around, and I'm excited to discuss and start studying already for next year.
Oh, God, it's going to be so much fun. There's so many great prospects coming out, particularly at the running back position. We're going to be giving you guys that throughout, January, February, and all the way up into the draft. So I'm glad Casey brought that up. Little housekeeping first off. Remember, we're still doing DraftKings signups via our website. If you sign up through DraftKings, it costs you nothing. It's a great way to support our website, and they kick us a little bit of commission. So we really appreciate those who've done that. We've gotten a couple people on the payroll so far, so we really appreciate it. Whether you're coming to us live via Facebook or Reddit or just coming through the site through the Google search engines, we're just very happy to have you guys here listening to us, and we hope we can give you some good information. Also, our YouTube channel launched this week officially, and we'll be having these podcasts up on YouTube. We're still working out some of the kinks. It's going to take a second, so just kind of bear with us while we figure out how to get the full podcast on there. Currently, we have only 10-minute clips of it, but we're working on trying to get our site approved as a business site, which we've already done. That way we can post, the full podcast instead of just 10 minutes. So just bear with us there, but it's looking great, and we're just really excited to be coming to you through all these different mediums. So, Casey, what are we here to talk about today?
Well, George, first, speaking of DraftKings, I just want to say that our first DraftKings and daily fantasy-oriented article will be coming out this Saturday morning. So while you're clicking on the link on our site for DraftKings, check out the article and take some of that advice as well for these playoff games.
Absolutely. It's a great point. Definitely check that out for sure. This will be Casey's DraftKings article. He'll be giving you some sleepers and bust advice for this week. Now, I'm a little unfamiliar with how it works. Now, exactly is for the NFC and AFC title games, there's not too many players, right? But you can still make a daily fantasy league out of this.
Yeah, what they do is they give you a salary cap of $60,000 on DraftKings, and they adjust the prices of the players accordingly. So because there's only 2 games, you're going to have really volatile prices. So they don't really let you select all-stars. You're going to need to hit on some of these sleepers, and that's how you win big money in these leagues is by hitting on that. Last week, for instance, Danny Amendola, I'm sure whoever won the league last year had Danny Amendola on their team. So you're going to want to check out some advice to see who to go with there and which big-name players to go with to spend the big money on.
Absolutely, and Devontae Adams, too, for the Green Bay Packers was another great sleeper. So, yeah, tune in. Obviously, Casey just pointed out, you need to hit on sleepers to win in DraftKings, and Casey will be doing his best, his due diligence to figure out who the best sleeper will be. So check out his article. He's had some great calls throughout the season in his Sleepers and Bust article that's come out on every Saturday throughout the NFL season. So check out his DraftKings article. He always gives good information. So while I'm kissing his ass, let's talk a little bit about the coaching changes. Now, unfortunately, there's no John Gruden coaching this year.
Give me a green right slot, spider 2Y banana.
Sorry, guys. No John Gruden. He's still sticking with ESPN, making millions of dollars to sit and basically talk about how he loves Spider 2Y banana and whatever else. So, but we do have some good hires. We have Rex Ryan going to the Buffalo Bills. That was announced earlier this week. Obviously, that's big news. Everybody knows that. And Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator for the Arizona Cardinals, going to the New York Jets as a head coach. Now, everybody knows this already, but we want to talk a little bit, Casey and I, about what we think it'll mean for fantasy value for players as we get into 2015. Now, it's pretty early, So obviously we're just kind of speculating a little bit for now, but we just want to talk a little bit about what these coaches are known for, kind of what their makeup is, and what we think they can bring to the team, and how that might translate into fantasy value for everybody. So, Casey, let's get started off. Let's start off with Rex Ryan, because we talked a little bit about him this week. I mentioned him in my Sammy Watkins article on Tuesday. This guy, I mean, he's one of the great personalities of the NFL, and I'm so glad he's sticking around to coach. What do you think he's going to bring to the Buffalo Bills in terms of fantasy value and overall as well?
I don't think Rex Ryan even tries to hide what he's going to bring. He's the coach of my local team here with the Jets, with me living in New York, and all he talks about is we want to ground and pound, and I'm sure with him and Greg Roman being the offensive coordinator, that's going to be the Bills' identity. I mean, that's what they're going to be looking to do. It's an uninspiring hire from a fantasy perspective, but Bills fans are excited. It didn't take Buffalo long to get Ryan on board and then Roman right after. But from a fantasy perspective, I think the running backs could see the most value here. Sammy Watkins, maybe not as much.
Absolutely, and that's what we talked about that earlier this week with Sammy Watkins. We are kind of worried. Obviously, the biggest worry is probably the quarterback situation right now, right?
Who is the quarterback? I guess that's the situation.
That is the biggest question, yeah. Biggest question.
The one on the roster right now is E.J. Manuel, but Rex Ryan wouldn't commit to him earlier either today or yesterday, so it remains to be seen. It's going to be interesting. There's rumors about Mark Sanchez coming back to Rex Ryan, but we'll see. You don't know what kind of fantasy value anyone's going to have, I guess.
Yeah,
until that quarterback position is filled.
Absolutely. Now, let's just give some stats here on kind of what Rex Ryan has done and Greg Roman has done. Now, Greg Roman spent 2, 3, 4 years with the San Francisco 49ers running that offense, and that was also a very run-heavy offense. So these are two run-heavy guys. I'll just give you some stats here. In 2014, the Jets, fourth in rushing attempts with 507. They were tied with Dallas. Now, Dallas, obviously, DeMarco Murray ran the ball about 392 times. He led the league. Just a crazy amount of rushing attempts. So to tie with Dallas in your overall run game is pretty impressive. And then, 2013, the Jets, they ranked 5th overall in rushing attempts. So this is back-to-back years. They were in the top 5 in overall rushing attempts. This is a run coach. Now, Greg Roman with the 49ers, they ranked 9th in rushing attempts with 470 in 2014. Obviously, they kind of got away from the run game a little bit this year. Frank Gore, started to show a little bit of wear and tear down the stretch of the season. And you had Carlos Hyde kind of still a rookie, getting his sea legs a little bit. They didn't quite trust him that much in his first year, and they kept going to Gore more often than not. So Greg Roman, the Niners, typically a run team, though. That's still 9th in rushing attempts, top 10 in running the ball. So then just a year earlier, in 2013, Greg Roman and the 49ers were 3rd in rushing attempts with 505 total. So this is a team that, this is two guys who just in the top 10 and more often than not in the top 5 in running the ball. Now, how does that exactly translate, though, to Buffalo with their current running back crop? They kind of have been either injury prone, and they got some vets there with Spiller and Fred Jackson. Now, Spiller, the young up-and-comer who everyone is high on, and then you got Fred Jackson, who's kind of the veteran who always finds his way in the lineup, very smart, great receiver out of the backfield. So, Casey, what do you think these coaches are going to do exactly with the running back situation? Do you see that kind of that amount of attempts for Fred Jackson or C.J. Spiller? They're currently on the roster.
I see something similar to what we saw with the Jets. Both of these coaches, they love to run the ball, and now there's no one saying that they should pass. It's kind of a weird combination. You got two guys who just they're mainly focused on the run. The Greg Roman hire in particular is really a concern to me from a Bills standpoint. But I don't want you to forget about Bryce Brown either, because, the Jets, as much as they had Ivory and Chris Johnson, Bilal Powell's on that field all the time too, so I could see a 3-back kind of thing happening where Bryce Brown chips in a little bit. But Spiller and Fred Jackson will get most of the carries, and they will get a lot of carries and touches. That's the way these guys like to coach. And the quarterback, I mean, it's going to be a free agent or it's going to be a rookie, so I could see them going conservative with a lot of dump-offs and whatnot, whoever it's going to be.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. And I don't think they can quite get away from this. A lot of coordinators, especially Chan Gailey, who we'll talk a little bit about next, they kind of don't have a specific system, and they kind of will adjust. I really don't see how Rex Ryan and Greg Roman could possibly adjust and make this a passing offense. Now, obviously, the quarterback, when they finally do figure out who's going to be under center, whether it's E.J. Manuel or whether they, try to get somebody in free agency, maybe Brian Hoyer or one of those guys, or even possibly draft one. This is kind of a weak quarterback draft, though, so I don't know if that's going to happen. But it's all going to depend on what the system is. Now, I wrote a little bit about Sammy Watkins. You guys can check that article out. It's currently up in the main section of our site. But I think Sammy Watkins can overcome this, these coordinators. I don't think he's going to be completely irrelevant. That guy is seriously talented. I think injuries slowed him down more than anything this year. It wasn't, and obviously the offense kind of sputtered out on the offensive line of the Bills, which I want to talk a little bit about again too, by the way. But what do you think of Sammy Watkins' value for fantasy purposes this year?
It's not going to take a step back because I think he will improve upon his rookie season. I just don't think he's going to take as much of a step forward as he should. I think they're really going to try to run the ball a ton. I mean, that's what these guys do. And the Greg Roman hiring, when you have a receiver like Sammy Watkins, who you traded up to draft so early, I don't see how you don't get some sort of coordinator in there who's really trying to air it out or focusing on the pass. I mean, you're going back to this ground and pound stuff that didn't work with the Jets, and now, I mean, the Bills brought basically what the Jets like to do over to their team. I don't know if that's encouraging or not. And Roman, I mean, he came from the 49ers. I don't know why they hire him so quickly, coming off a disappointing year where Kaepernick took a step back, Crabtree didn't do anything, Vernon Davis didn't do anything. They got Steve Johnson on their team. He was supposed to be a part of the passing game. He didn't do anything. So they're bringing Greg Roman in just purely from a run game standpoint, I guess, because he was a huge disappointment last year when it comes to throwing the football.
Absolutely. And obviously, no one's talking about Robert Woods, even though I think he's a very viable receiver too. But going back to Watkins, I think his touchdowns could definitely go up. I think they're still going to throw to him, especially around the red zone. The guy is just big. He can use his body. He can jump up, grab the jump ball type throws and the fades in the end zone. I think he's still going to be fine. I just worry more so about his yards, just because, I mean, he is a flash in the pan guy. He will make big plays. It's just a matter of, is he going to consistently see like those target numbers? Obviously, this year he saw quite a bit of targets. I mean, the Bills were definitely still a very run-heavy team overall with Doug Marrone. But it's one of those things where you just wonder if because Watkins was still getting maybe 10, 11 targets on average per game, I'd say. I mean, there were some games where he had a little bit less than that. He definitely had games where he maybe had 5 or 6. But when they wanted, especially when Kyle Orton got there, I mean, they were really trying to get him involved. Now, I see that definitely happening with Rex Ryan and them. I just don't know if they're going to be passing the ball enough to really make it worth it to draft Sammy Watkins. And then you got all these other wide receivers going on. I know we've talked about this already, but I find myself really fascinated by this topic for some reason. But yeah, like I said, I think it's just a touchdown. It'll probably affect more so his yards than his touchdowns. I think he'll still get the touchdowns. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about the Bills' offensive line. Now, as they struggled mightily in the beginning of the season, they kind of got better as the season went along. I imagine that Rex Ryan and Greg Roman are going to have to go out and find some offensive linemen to block for these running backs, don't you think?
I do. I think they will try to improve via the draft and maybe one free agent. But if there's something that these coaches can fix, it's an offensive line from a running game standpoint.
Absolutely.
I'm not concerned at all about their run game. I think they will do fine there.
Do you bump up C.J. Spiller's value next year for fantasy purposes right now?
If he's still on the roster, because it's not. I don't think it's a given.
Yes.
then yes, I do. If he's still around and he's rumored to be in the mix, I would bump up his value. He obviously is injury prone.
Obviously.
He's got something wrong with him. So it's not someone I would spend an early pick on. It's someone I would try to draft maybe as a third running back or something in that range. It's
really frustrating with Spiller because we thought this was the year that he was finally going to pop under Doug Marrone, who's a running-oriented coach, and it just didn't happen. Obviously, injuries played a huge role in that, and offensive line did not play particularly well. That offense in general for the Bills really struggled to score. They were one of the worst red zone teams in the league this year. So I just think right now if they can go out and get some linemen. Now, keep in mind, Rex Ryan and the Jets, they were actually one of the top rushing teams in the league with Christopher Ivory and Chris Johnson. I mean, this running game was actually the best part of the Jets' offense. I know that's not saying very much considering their receiving game was atrocious with the quarterback play with Smith, who, very prone to turnovers at times, and then Michael Vick, who just looked old, unfortunately. So I think that running game has a real shot at improving, though, for the Bills this season.
No, I agree. And, with a team like the Jets, sometimes these running stats are skewed because it's really the only thing they could do. I mean, Geno Smith and Michael Vick couldn't really move the ball all that well, and their defense was awful. So they would fall behind, and the only way they'd be able to move the ball is run the ball. The other team didn't seem to care all that much.
Absolutely.
So, the stats were good, but I do trust Rex Ryan. I do trust Greg Roman when it comes to a run game, and I have no doubt that with guys like Spiller and Fred Jackson and Bryce Brown, that they'll be able to produce some good fantasy value and be good from an NFL standpoint.
I love that point. And like I said, we don't know who it's going to be yet. I mean, it's way too early. I mean, C.J. Spiller, like you said, he might not even be on the roster. And then Fred Jackson with his age, I mean, that guy's in his 30s. He continues to defy, what the traditional running back in his almost mid-30s can do on a football field. It's just incredible. But I just think in general, all fantasy people, if you're watching, keeping an eye on the Bills in the offseason, just note if they go for a running back in the draft or whatnot, he's going to be pretty valuable. And with Rex Ryan, like we said, and Greg Roman, those guys are run-oriented coaches. Now, we saw kind of what could happen this year, I think, with the Cincinnati Bengals. And what happens when an offensive coordinator like Hugh Jackson takes over, who wants to run the ball as much as possible, and they find the back that they like in Jeremy Hill. Jeremy Hill ends up being, one of the best sleepers probably overall this season at the running back position. So I'm not saying that's going to happen with the Bills, but we've seen that recipe before, and I think this is kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, everyone thought that Carlos Hyde would be taking Gore's job possibly, or at least share the touches with Gore, and Greg Roman stuck with Gore all the way. So maybe Roman's influence could get you a lead back over there.
Absolutely, and I think Gore was a little bit different a situation because that's more of a workhorse guy, whereas in Cincinnati, Giovanni Bernard, really quick, good receiver, not like a traditional every down back. So I think that's kind of why Jeremy Hill was able to eventually become the better option for them. So it's just a different starter in front of them. But I think if Spiller is going to be the starter and there's another running back behind him, whether it's Fred Jackson. I mean, I don't think Fred Jackson's an every down back either, but if they get somebody else in the draft, this is a great running back draft this year. I could see almost like if they find a Jeremy Hill-like guy and Spiller goes down, that would be a huge opportunity for a rookie back or somebody in free agency to end up being sort of like a Jeremy Hill.
Couldn't agree more.
Couldn't agree more. Well, let's switch gears here. We just talked about the Bills for a while. We were just talking about the Jets a little bit. Now, the next coach, this was a big hire this week. This one drew surprisingly a lot of controversy. There were some people who really didn't like this hire. But Todd Bowles, the defensive coordinator of the Arizona Cardinals, going to head coach the New York Jets, a team in complete freefall on the offensive end. I think that's why some people were unhappy with this hiring because the Jets, obviously they have problems in the secondary, but their front seven was really good this year. One of the best run defenses in the league this year. So I think they wanted to get a guy who was maybe going to try to change up their offense, which is one of the weaker parts of their team. But anyway, that's just what I deduced. So Todd Bowles, defensive coordinator Chan Gailey, the former Bills coach from 2010 to 2012, is now going to be the offensive coordinator. Casey, what exactly do you make of this move?
George, I'm one of those people, I think. This was a mind-boggling decision, and not because Todd Bowles isn't a great coach, because, I mean, Arizona's defense, they've overachieved 2 years in a row now, and I love everything that Todd Bowles has done, but the Jets had one of the best defensive coaches in the league already. Do they really expect such an upgrade over Rex Ryan from a defensive standpoint that they needed to bring in another defensive coach to run this team? I mean, they obviously were struggling so much on offense. Geno Smith needs someone that can develop a quarterback. And, I mean, for years this offense has had problems, and they bring in another defensive guy over Rex Ryan. It just doesn't make any sense to me. What about you?
Absolutely. I totally agree. And unfortunately, I mean, Geno Smith, I know he said those controversial remarks about how he played at a Pro Bowl level at some time, or at some, at certain points of the season he was playing at a Pro Bowl level. And I've watched a lot of film on the Jets, and I mean, not a ton. They're not the team that I follow the most. I don't follow them as much as maybe the Jaguars or some other teams that I feel like are really just a couple years away from being really good on offense. But Geno Smith does flash moments where you go, hey, that was a pretty good throw. He'll have like one quarter or one drive where he just looks really good. And especially he plays well against the Patriots for some reason too. This is a guy who's got some potential, and he's gotten a really bad situation overall with just the receivers he has and the type of offense that Rex Ryan had him run. I mean, Mark Sanchez hated it too. I remember reading so much about how Sanchez was just infuriated with Ryan for not letting him throw the ball down the field consistently and not letting him really just kind of spread his wings. And I think Geno Smith kind of has that situation too. And obviously you got Vic there. I mean, who knows what he's going to do at this point? I mean, he's probably 1 or 2 years away from retiring. So I do think Geno Smith should be the guy. I don't put any stock in his fantasy value whatsoever, though, at least at this point, especially with these two hires, because, I mean, there's really nothing that I can see them doing. Now, do you think Todd Bowles, I mean, everybody raves about this guy, how he's just one of those workaholic, cerebral-type dudes. Do you think his personality could kind of change? Because this is a guy who's personality-wise completely the opposite of Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan, a real players coach, likes to yuck it up with the fans. I've seen him down in Cortland. I've gotten right next to him, and he just loves to interact with everybody and stuff. Todd Bowles doesn't seem quite like that dude. Is this something that could change almost the culture of the Jets? And I know people like to use that term a lot, but do you see that happening at all?
Well, yeah, I think that was the reason for this hire. They must have been impressed with his interviews, because I mean, Rex Ryan was a guy who loved being in the media, loved having the headlines, loved looking like an idiot. To be honest, loved all these quotes were guaranteeing a win, or the Patriots are going down, or whatever he was saying. He liked to talk a lot of smack, and Todd Bowles is all business. You're not going to see his players talking in the media like that, and if you do, I'm sure he's not going to be okay with it. So I think the culture will change here. I think that's what they were going for. And I guess one thing I'll say is that Rex Ryan, obviously, after seeing him for so long in New York, he didn't have a clue when it came to offense.
No.
He kind of just left it up to the coordinator. He did not have any idea. I don't know Todd Bowles' offensive background and what he knows and what he doesn't know. So if he could bring something to the table on offense, then I could see why they would hire someone like that, because the personality and the man himself, he seems like a good guy to lead a football team.
Absolutely. So Todd Bowles, I mean, this might be able to work out, because of Chan Gailey, hiring Chan Gailey as the offensive coordinator. Now, I think if Todd Bowles can kind of change the culture of the team, like we just mentioned, and then, Gailey, who's a guy who doesn't really have a set offense, which is probably good for a team like the Jets because they don't really have an identity. I think they kind of were a run team, but it wasn't the strength of their team. I mean, obviously Chris Ivory was solid at times. Chris Johnson, not the worst backup running back you can have. He played good in spurts like he usually does. I think Chan Gailey is a guy who is a little bit underrated in terms of how he's been able to transform offenses. When he was with the Bills just not too long ago, 2010 to 2012, he turned the Bills into kind of a more pass-oriented team. Now, here's some of the numbers. They averaged 36 passing attempts per game, which ranked in the top 15 back when they had Ryan Fitzpatrick. And Chan Gailey took Ryan Fitzpatrick and turned him into like a potential Pro Bowl quarterback for a while. Then, as we all know, Fitzpatrick got that giant extension. I think that was in 2011, and then he never really played as well after that. So I like, Chan Gailey. He's proven he's got the ability to turn a decent quarterback into an even better one. Do you think Chan Gailey is a good hire for Geno Smith?
A lot of people are down on this hire, and I can see why he hasn't had so much winning success in the NFL. But when he's done well, I think, with the hand he's dealt, pretty much everywhere he's been. Like you said with Fitzpatrick, he got Fitzpatrick a $60 million contract. I mean,
right.
Someone got fooled by Chan Gailey's offense.
Yeah.
They gave Ryan Fitzpatrick $60 million. Not all guaranteed, but they gave him that kind of contract. I want you to take a listen to these quarterbacks he's worked with. This is everyone he's worked with. Fitzpatrick, he worked with Tyler Thigpen, Cordell Stewart, Mike Tomczak, and he worked with an end-of-the-career Troy Aikman. So he worked with Aikman. He's fine, but at the end of his career, if you recall, he wasn't too fine. So that's who he worked with. He made the playoffs 6 times. So I actually give him credit. And
yeah, I do too.
What I want to say is I give the Jets a little bit of hope here because what you've always wanted to see from the Jets is some fantasy value from their receivers. And listen to these career years that have happened under Chan Gailey. I'm just going to tell you the names, and you're going to see how unheralded or oh yeah, that guy. I remember when he was good in that one year. So you got Yancey Thigpen. You got Charles Johnson, both from Pittsburgh way back in 96, 97. You got Rocket Ishmael from Dallas.
Yep.
He had over 1,000 yards back in Aikman's last year. You got Chris Chambers from Miami. He was good for a couple of years, but nothing so spectacular long term. He turned Steve Johnson into a Pro Bowler. Then Steve Johnson goes to San Fran, and he's nothing. So was it Gailey? Was it Steve Johnson himself? Was it a mixture? And then you got Dwayne Bowe, who produced huge numbers in Kansas City, and now the guy can't get in the end zone. So yeah. Gailey has something to do with this.
I think it's his. Do you think it's just his pass orientedness? Or
it's not. He's not always pass oriented. It's like what you said. He adjusts to the personnel, and what happens with him from a receiver standpoint. What I've seen is that it's usually one guy who thrives. He doesn't produce many good wide receivers. So we're going to have to figure out if it's going to be Decker, which it probably will be, or if Harvin's there too, will it be him?
Yeah, Eric Decker and Percy Harvin. Obviously, Percy Harvin, very underwhelming numbers this year. Wasn't even really a factor in the Jets' offense. It'll be interesting to see how Gailey uses him. And I can be honest with you, no expert knows what Chan Gailey is thinking. This guy he's adjusted, like Casey just said, to basically every type of personnel that he's got, which is good. I mean, I think that's the best kind of coach or the best kind of coordinator you can have, somebody who adjusts, or if somebody who knows his system already and knows the type of pieces. But as we all know in the NFL, it's really tough to be able to have a system and find the right pieces because you're kind of dealt a hand. You're hired into the job and you just get the players you get. I mean, Chip Kelly is finding that out. With his system for sure in Philly. So it's not like college where you can just go out and recruit anybody you want and you know exactly how they're going to fit in. It's totally not like that. So it's good to have a guy like that. So I totally agree with you. Let me just give you a few more numbers. This was Chan Gailey's best season in Buffalo. The offense ranked 19th in yards per game, 14th in points per game, 13th in rushing yards per game. So all like around top 15 numbers offensively. So the Jets, they have some pieces like Casey said with Percy Harvin, Eric Decker. I think they're going to need one more. They're going to need probably another receiver, just kind of a rock type dude. They also have Jason Morrow at tight end, who's not terrible. So it's one of those things. I agree with you. I think there's some hope for the Jets.
Yeah, I think you're going to be seeing some value finally. You're going to get out of those days from Rex Ryan when it's all supposed ground and pound and whatnot, but it's really just a bad offense. And what people are thinking is that they're going to put Geno Smith, if it's Geno Smith, that they're going to put him back into a spread type of offense like he had in West Virginia.
Interesting.
So he'll be more comfortable with that. But I'm also hearing that they might try to get Ryan Fitzpatrick to come over to the Jets to compete with him. So we'll see what happens there. And I think we're going to see someone produce some really good fantasy value at the wide receiver position.
Absolutely. And we'll talk more about the Jets